Hello and welcome to our very first Messy Church at Home. Today we are thinking about Palm Sunday and the story of the Great Parade. So I'm going to read this story to you to start off with, and then we can go through some of the crafts and activities. "Let's go to Jerusalem," said Jesus to his friends. "I have something important to do there." So they went. And when they could just see the city from a nearby hillside, Jesus said, "Let's have a parade." Jesus' friends were surprised. A parade? They wondered. Why a parade? But no one said anything, because Jesus was already busy giving instructions. "I want two of you to borrow a donkey," he said. "Tell the owner I need it. He'll understand." When the two friends returned with the donkey, Jesus hopped onto its back, gently nudged its sides, and started down the hill. His friends followed close behind. "Hooray for Jesus!" they shouted. "Jesus is king!" Down, down, down they rode towards the city gate, and the closer they got, the more people joined them. "It's Jesus the teacher," someone called. "It's Jesus the healer," called someone else. "Three cheers for Jesus," called one and all. Soon there were people everywhere marching along with the parade and shouting from the roadside. Some took off their coats and laid them in front of the donkey. Others cut palm branches from the trees and waved them about. There were hundreds, maybe thousands, clapping and dancing and shouting their way through the city gates. Everyone was happy. I can see somebody who's not happy. Can you see somebody who was not happy? Well, almost everyone. Some of the religious leaders didn't like Jesus. They were jealous because the ordinary people were so fond of him, and when they saw the parade, they frowned. "Wait just a minute," they called. "You can't have a parade here. Tell your friends to be quiet, Jesus." But Jesus just laughed. "Tell them to be quiet? Impossible." Then he turned to look at the crowd. "Can't you see," he said, "there's so much happiness here that even if I could make the people quiet, the stones in the street would jump up and shout for joy." Ah, what a fantastic story. That's from this book, the Lion Storyteller Bible book, which is really good. It's got lots of brilliant stories in it. So we're thinking about that today because today is Palm Sunday. This happened exactly a week before Easter, and today is exactly a week before Easter. So I wonder if you can think of some of the questions that you've got on your sheet. On your sheet it says, "Why do you think Jesus rode in on a donkey?" It's a bit strange to ride in on a donkey. Most kings and important people ride big horses and stallions. A donkey, he would have looked a bit silly on a donkey because it's quite small. It's what the children ride or the poor people rode. I wonder why you think he rode in on a donkey. And why do you think the people shouted, "Hosanna! Hosanna in the highest"? They were praising Jesus. They must have seen something special in him, mustn't they? And why do you think the people put some of their clothes on the floor to be trampled by the donkey? Lots of very curious things happening in that story. But I think it's time to do some crafts. And you'll notice on your sheet that there are two options. So I'm going to do both of them quickly and you can take a bit longer and do them properly, okay? So the first one is making some palm branches that we can wave. Now, if you've got a tree in your garden, you might like to go out later and find a stick. And if you don't, you can either use a bit of cardboard or a straw, or I've rolled up a bit of brown paper that came in a parcel, so you might have lots of spare brown paper, and you can roll it up and stick it together, and then you can make a stick. Now, for the leaves, you can go and collect leaves if they're already on the floor in your garden. You might not want to pick fresh leaves. Mummy and Daddy might not be very happy if you do that off the trees because the trees need them. But if there's some leaves on the floor in your garden, you could use actual leaves. If not, why don't you get some paper? I've used green paper here, but you could colour some paper in green. And then what we're going to do is we're going to draw around our hands. So this is my hand, and I've used a nice thick black pen to make it really easy. Now my hand's a bit big, so I can only fit 2 hands on one piece of paper. You might be able to fit lots of hands on one piece of paper. Once you've drawn round your hand, you can cut it out, or you can ask an older brother or sister to cut it out if you don't really like using scissors. I'm sure they'll help you, because it's nice to help each other. And you cut all the way around the fingers, because the fingers are going to be like the little leaves that you find on a palm branch. Do you remember in the picture? A palm branch has got lots and lots of leaves, so that's going to be a bit like the fingers. So if you can have lots of hands, then you'll have lots and lots of leaves, and it'll look even better. Once you've finished cutting all the way around your hand, here's one I did earlier, you can stick it onto your stick that you made earlier or that you found earlier. Okay, now you can either use PVA glue if you've got some and then leave it for a long time to dry. That's a really good thing to do, but it does take a long time to dry. Or you could use a stapler, or you could use some sellotape. If we all use different things, we'll all have very different palm branches, won't we? That'd be quite funny. Let's see what we all come up with. So you stick your hands on like this, and if you keep putting them all the way around and all the way down, you'll end up with a really good palm branch. So definitely send me a picture so I can see if you managed to make a really good one, and I'm going to keep going with this one, and I'll put up a picture a bit later. Now if you want to do the other activity, we're going to weave some material like the coats that they threw on the floor. So what you need for that is a piece of cardboard or card, and you need to cut it so that it's got these bumps on either side. It doesn't matter how many bumps you put in, and they're probably about 1 centimetre long or 1 centimetre apart. Okay, once you've done that, you'll need to get some wool. Now I've chosen some nice bright orange wool, and there's 2 ways of doing this. You can either tie it in a circle and then cut it, and then tie it in a circle around the next bump and cut it, and tie it in a circle around the next bump and cut it. Or you can do the cheat way, which is the way I'm going to do, and I'm just going to wrap it round like this, all the way round, okay? And then I'm going to tie it on the same side that it's tied before, and what that means is that the other side is nice and tidy, like this one. So I'm going to cut my wool here so I can tie it. Like this. And I'm sorry, you can't see my table very well. If I do it over here, you might be able to see. Okay. So now you've got a card that looks like this. This is going to be the basis of your weaving. So now you can choose a different colour wool if you've got a different colour, or you can use string, or you can use anything that looks a bit like wool is absolutely fine. I've got some red wool here. Now this is a lot easier if you cut a piece off right at the beginning. So I'm going to cut off a piece of my red wool, and I'm going to go to the first string, and I'm just going to put it underneath the first string and tie, can you see, tie a little knot at the top to make sure that it stays in place. Like that, okay? So this bit's tied on and that's just the end. And then what you do with your wool is you go under one string and you pull it all the way through, and then you go over the next string and then under the next one, and then over the next one, and then under, and when you get to the end, all you do is go back the other way. So I've gone under it this time, so then now I have to go over it, and then the next one I went under, so I have to go over it. Okay, now the trick here is not to pull too tight, because if you pull them really tight, then all your strings will squeeze together and you'll get quite a thin bit of weaving. which is fine, you can use it as a bookmark if it's a bit thinner. If you keep it to about this size, then what you'll get is a really nice coaster that you can use, and you can put cups and things on it. Okay, so you keep going under and over all the way along. Now, and if you want to, you can change colours, although I suggest that you do at least 10 rows of each colour, because they're quite thin rows because of the wool, and it takes it, you have to tie it back on and then tie the next one back on. So I've done my first 2 rows like this, okay, and the more you do, the further down it gets. Now this is one where I've pulled a little bit tight, so it's gone into more of a bookmark shape, but you get all the way down to the end, and if you can try and keep it the same length, it can make a nice bookmark, or you can keep it nice and wide and you can make it into a nice coaster, and it can remind you of the story of throwing the clothes and the branches down on the floor. Please do send me pictures if you do that. I'm really excited to see the patterns you come up with, and yeah, how you managed to make it. On your sheet also, you'll find 2 other boxes. One of them has got an activity in, and your activity is to try and make your own parade. So there's a picture of a Lego parade in there. You might want to use Lego, or you might have some other ideas. You might be able to use your teddies, you might be able to use just loads of different toys. You might be able to act out. If you've got a big family, you could actually dress up and act it all out. Again, I'd love to see pictures if you do that. Yeah, so get creative and see what you can do. The last box is our challenge box. And the challenge is to think about sharing. You know, the man who owned the donkey didn't know Jesus. Jesus just sent his friend to him and said, can we borrow your donkey, please? And he said, what? Who's it for? And he said, oh, it's for the teacher. And the man said yes, and he gave him his donkey and let him go off with it. I thought that was really generous. And it might feel quite hard to be generous when you're stuck at home, but there's lots of things that we can do. We can be generous with our time and phone somebody up and see how they are. We can be generous with our talents. Maybe you could make a little video on how to do some weaving, and you could share it with some younger children so that they can learn too. There's lots of different things you could do around the house to help your parents. You could, share in the housework, and that might be a really lovely thing for your parents to have. So your challenge from today, at some point today, is to do some sharing if you can. Okay, well, I'm going to say a prayer and I'm going to leave you to it. But yes, I would love to find out how you're doing a bit later on. Jesus, thank you for this day when people celebrated who you are. Help us to remember that you are the King and that we want to praise you. And help us to be good at being generous and sharing. Amen. Okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice day. Bye.